Welcome to Easy A Homeschool Academy.
Let's learn about life during colonial times in America. This time period in history spans from the early 1600s to approximately 1775. During this video, we will be learning about life of the colonists. Colonists are people who leave their native country to settle in a new territory, often under the control of their home country, with the intention of establishing a permanent or semi-permanent community. These settlements are usually part of a larger system of colonization, where the colonizing country exerts political, economic, and cultural influence over the new territory. Early colonization refers to the period when European powers, particularly Spain, England, France, and the Netherlands, began establishing permanent settlements in the Americas between the late 15th and 17th centuries. These European powers were motivated by various reasons. Economic gain. Some European nations sought wealth through resources like gold, silver, and cash crops, including tobacco and sugar. They also aimed to establish trade routes and monopolies on goods such as fur and spices. Religious freedom. Some groups, particularly from England, fled religious persecution. For instance, the Pilgrims in 1620 and the Puritans in 1630 settled in New England to practice their religion freely. Glory and national rivalry. European powers competed to expand their empires, gain international prestige, and secure strategic locations. Spread of Christianity. Catholic powers like Spain and France sought to spread Christianity by converting indigenous peoples. As stated before, the major European powers referred to Spain, England, France, and the Netherlands. Spain was one of the earliest colonizers, with Christopher Columbus's voyages starting in 1492, initiating Spanish control in the Caribbean and Americas. Spanish colonies spread through Central and South America, including Mexico, Peru, and parts of North America, which modern day today relates to Florida and the Southwest US. The Spanish established a system of encomiendas, using forced labor from Native Americans to extract resources. England focused primarily on the east coast of North America, beginning with the Roanoke colony in 1585 and the successful establishment of Jamestown in Virginia in 1607. English colonies were often driven by joint stock companies, for example, the Virginia Company, and developed agricultural economies, particularly in tobacco and cotton. English settlers also sought religious freedom, as seen in the founding of Plymouth by the Pilgrims and Massachusetts Bay by the Puritans. France's colonization efforts were centered on Canada, also known as New France, and the Mississippi River Valley. French colonists, especially fur traders, developed relationships with Native American tribes through trade and alliances. Major settlements included Quebec in 1608 and Montreal in 1642. The Dutch established New Netherland along the Hudson River, which is modern-day New York, in the early 1600s, with New Amsterdam, later New York City, as its capital. The Dutch were primarily focused on trade and had a strong economic presence through the Dutch West Indian Company. Let's learn more about the daily life of the colonists. Daily life for colonists in America varied greatly depending on the region, New England, Middle, or Southern colonies, the time period, and the individual circumstances such as class, gender, and occupation. However, certain general themes can be observed across colonial life. Housing. The early settlers often built simple and utilitarian-style homes. Many early colonists lived in wooden houses with thatched roofs or even dirt floor cabins. Over time, more permanent homes were built. The New England colonists' homes were typically made of wood or stone, and homes were often clustered in small villages. They usually consisted of a large central room with a fireplace that provided heat and a place for cooking. Plantations in the South built large homes for wealthy landowners, while smaller farmers lived in basic wooden structures or log cabins. Work and labor. Most colonists were farmers. Daily life revolved around planting, tending, and harvesting crops. In New England, due to rocky soil and colder climate, farming was generally small scale, focused on subsistence crops like corn, beans, and squash. The middle colonies, known as the breadbasket, grew grains, while southern colonists relied on cash crops like tobacco, rice, and indigo. In towns, skilled laborers such as blacksmiths, cobbers, tailors, and carpenters were essential. Many apprentices learned a trade by living and working with a master craftsman. Indentured servants worked for a set number of years in exchange for passage to the colonies, while enslaved Africans were forced into lifelong labor. Enslaved people worked on plantations or in homes, while indentured servants were more common in early colonial settlements. Food and cooking. Colonists largely grew or raised their own food. In New England, the diet was heavy on corn, beans, and squash, which was a skill they learned from the Native Americans, along with fish, pork, and game. In the South, diets included corn, sweet potatoes, and meat such as pork and poultry. Food was usually cooked over an open hearth fire. Women were responsible for preparing meals, which included hours of labor, including baking bread, smoking meats, preserving food for winter, and making dairy products like butter and cheese. Clothing. Most colonial clothing was made at home. Women spun wool or flax into thread and wove it into cloth to make garments. Clothing was practical and simple, designed for hard work and weather. Clothing in colder climates often included layers. Men typically wore breeches, waistcoats, and overcoats, while women wore long dresses, aprons, and caps. The wealthier southern planters often wore finer imported clothes, while small farmers and laborers dressed similarly to those in the north. Religion. Religion played a central role in daily life, especially in New England, where Puritanism shaped society. Many New Englanders attended church services regularly, with Sundays being devoted entirely to religious observance. In the middle colonies, religious diversity was more common, including Quakers, Catholics, Lutherans, and Jews. The southern colonies were primarily Anglican from the Church of England, though religious observance could vary. In colonial life, religious leaders often played important roles in community governance. Education. Education was highly valued in Puritan communities, and many children were taught to read, particularly so they could read the Bible. The Massachusetts Bay Colony passed a law in 1647 requiring towns to establish schools. In the middle and southern colonies, formal education was less common, especially in rural areas. Wealthier families often hired private tutors or sent children to England for schooling. For the poor, education was informal and mainly focused on practical skills. Girls received less education than boys, often learning domestic skills such as sewing, cooking, and managing a household. Social life and entertainment. Social life often revolved around church, town meetings or gatherings like barn raisins or harvest festivals. Church services, town meetings, and market days were important for socializing. Despite their hard lives, colonists found time for recreation. In New England, games like ninepins, an early form of bowling, was played. Card games and sports like wrestling were also popular. In the South, horse racing, Cockfighting and hunting were common among the wealthy. Music, dancing, and storytelling were popular forms of entertainment across the colonies. Taverns were important social hubs, especially in towns where men gathered to drink, discuss news, and conduct business. Gender roles. Men typically handled farming, hunting, trade, and political leadership. Fathers had legal authority over their families and were the primary economic providers. Women were responsible for running the household, which included cooking, sewing, tending gardens, raising children, and sometimes assisting in the family business or farm. From a young age, children were expected to help with daily chores. Boys often assisted their fathers in the field, while girls learned household tasks from their mothers. Formal education for children was less common in rural areas, though they were expected to learn practical skills for adult life. In summary, daily life for colonists was centered around work, community, and survival, with most people living simple lives focused on farming and family. Despite hardships like disease and conflict, colonial communities grew and developed a sense of identity that would later influence the drive toward independence. I hope you learned something about life during the colonial times in America today. Thanks for taking this learning journey with me. Until next time.
As always, thank you for watching. Tell us what you want to see next. Email ezaHomeschoolacademy@yahoo.com. Like and share our videos. Please subscribe to our channel.